Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSpod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSpod and patronize me. Now, this episode's going out maybe a little bit late. I'm not quite sure. We'll see when it gets processed. I am in the middle of a busy week. I'm currently in San Francisco. After 2 more days here, I'll fly on a red-eye to Washington, D.C. to do a little congressional work, and then go to Annapolis for a few days to go back to St. John's College, where I went to grad school, and spend a bunch of time discussing Anna Karenina, because that's my idea of a vacation. I came to San Francisco a couple of days early, though, and I got in some podcasts, and you're going to get to listen to them in the next couple of weeks. I got to record with the great cartoonist M.K. Brown, which was a blast. She's really, really a lot of fun, and I knew nothing about her as a person, but had adored her work since I was probably far too young, reading National Lampoon in the local drugstore when I was a kid. Now, that was Sunday's session. Monday, which is the day we're recording this, I got in 2 more sessions. One with a publisher named Malcolm Margolin, who just retired after 40-plus years running Heyday Books in Berkeley, and also Paul Mavridis. Paul is, he was Gilbert Shelton's partner on The Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, the great illustrator and designer for the Church of the Subgenius, and a really interesting guy. We had a pretty neat conversation. Now, all 3 of those were a lot of fun. The problem was that I made a rookie mistake when I recorded with Malcolm, and amazingly, and I still am trying to find someone else to blame for this and can't, the main recorder did not record our conversation. When we finished up, I pressed stop, and I noticed that it started. And so I screwed up and didn't get the conversation recorded on our main, but luckily the backup was going just fine the entire time, and the entirety of the conversation is caught there. And you'll get to hear that one later this summer. It's, it was a really good conversation. And I've gotten, I've done so much talking in the last 2 days, my voice is kind of shot at this point, and I've got 2 more days of trade show ahead of me, and I'm going to be doing a lot more talking, so I better cut this kind of short. Now, our guest this week is Jim Ottaviani. Jim is, he's the author of the new book, The Imitation Game, Alan Turing Decoded, from Abrams Comic Arts. So it's a comic biography, graphic novel, whatever, about Alan Turing. It's drawn by Leland Purvis. Jim doesn't draw his comics, but he does write a lot of comics about science and scientists. And the thing to know about this book, called The Imitation Game, is that it is not related to the movie of the same name. The book is a really touching portrait of the life of the great mathematician and computer pioneer Alan Turing. I enjoyed it a lot. And knowing a whole bunch about Turing's life, I went into it wondering what devices Jim was going to use to tell the story, like how he would make it fresh. And he came up with some really innovative stuff. It's very interestingly told. It's a really, really compelling book. It was an absolute pleasure to read. So go pick up The Imitation Game, Alan Turing Decoded, from Jim Ottaviani and Leland Purvis. And Jim and I got together at TCAF, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, last May. I'd met him at past TCAFs, and I think I met him back in like 1998 at a small press expo. All I really knew was, he writes a lot of comics about scientists. I'm pretty sure he was a nuclear engineer, and I figured this is a guy who can probably talk to me about what he's learned about how to tell a story and what the books and comics were that sort of guided him along. So here's Jim's bio. Jim Ottaviani has worked in news agencies and golf courses in the Chicago area, nuclear reactors in the U.S. and Japan, and libraries in Michigan. He still works as a librarian by day, but stays up late writing comics about scientists. When he's not doing these things, he's spraining his ankles and flattening his feet by running on trails. Or he's reading. He reads a lot. Elsewhere on the web, you can find him at www.gtlabs.com, and that's GT-LABS. He's a writer of a number of comics about science and scientists, including Two-Fisted Science, the New York Times bestseller Feynman, and the recently published The Imitation Game, Alan Turing Decoded, from Abrams Comic Arts. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Jim Ottaviani. Start from the beginning. How do you get started doing comics about science and scientists? Which is probably a story you've told a million times, but
I hope it's not a million yet. Okay. When it's a million, I won't need the support of the government, or right. I'm actually not getting government support. Although I did start, the first book I published was published with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle support.
Was there a grant?
I got a Xeric grant a number of years ago to do the first book, but you need to roll back a little bit further than that, I think. Yeah. To why did I even have anything to submit to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Foundation? It's not what it was called. And my background is in science, specifically engineering. I was a nuclear engineer for a number of years, got a bachelor's and master's in that, and
no superpowers from being exposed to radiation.
I've done almost all the stuff that should get it for you. I've had the nuclear radiation. I've been in the deepest, darkest parts of China, and just like deepest, darkest Africa. It's not actually dark. It's just because white guys hadn't been around for a while, and didn't notice. Chemical spills,
cosmic rays, spider bite.
Well, you've had cosmic rays.
That's true.
Yeah.
All this
in
air
fact,
travel.
I was going to say, if you flew here, you got it covered. I am not the last son of a dying planet, as far as I know. I hope that's
your parents have been holding something back this whole time,
right? But anyway,
but nuclear engineering,
and that exposes you to lots and lots of mathematics, lots and lots of equations, lots and lots of physics, and you start seeing, Schrodinger's name and Heisenberg and Bohr and Curie and all these people, and not everybody gets curious about who they were and what the context was behind their discoveries. Mm-hmm. But I did, and started to read history of science in particular, and found out that Niels Bohr was a really fascinating and wonderful human being. Heisenberg is a fascinating, possibly wonderful, but very complex and conflicted human, and on and on and on it goes. Yeah. And couple that with being a comic book fan. I was exposed, like many people my age, and I'm in my early 50s now, there was one type of comics, and that was the action adventure stuff that was easily available. And so, guys in tights punching each other. I was exposed to all that stuff as a kid, and I really loved Spider-Man. Science guy, kind of unpopular, hidden powers that nobody else knows about. Amazing that might resonate with someone who was interested in science and wasn't like big man on campus at high school. No shock. But anyway, mid-80s come around, and you start seeing really interesting stuff. Love and Rockets, American Flag, Mouse, and of course, because I'm still a nerd, Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and all these things. and started reading comics again fairly seriously, and eventually put two and two together. It's like I love these stories. I love this medium. Nobody's doing them. You keep waiting.
Why hasn't somebody come up with
right? And eventually you say, maybe it's me, with no basis for thinking that I could or should be able to do this, other than some encouragement from my friend Steve Lieber, who said, "Yeah." We were talking about a book called "The Making of the Atomic Bomb" by Richard Rhodes, which is an excellent history of the Manhattan Project, and we had gotten. I had loaned it to him, and we were having dinner or something, and talking about the book, and he mentioned, and he's so tuned to story and so tuned to drama in ways that I was not. Said, "Wow, this meeting between Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg during World War II, when Bohr remains in Copenhagen, and Copenhagen is Denmark, is taken over by the Nazis for a while." And Heisenberg had remained in Germany throughout all this as well. And Heisenberg says, "I want to come and visit you." And Bohr's like I have a choice.
Right.
And they meet and probably talk about atomic weapons. But neither of them can agree on what they said to each other. Eventually, some of these unfinished letters come out, and Bohr just rewrites and rewrites his own history. So there's a great deal of drama inherent in this, and Steve pointed that out, and I said, "Wow, that's right. This is really good. What if I wrote a comic script about that? Would you draw it?" And he's like totally confident that there's no problem with saying yes, because I've never done anything at all like this.
Right. What are the chances of follow through? Yeah.
Exactly. Professional artists like him hear this all the time.
I should draw something that that'd be great. Yeah.
That's absolutely. Check back with me when you got the script done. But to his shock and horror, probably, I actually did write the script, and that became one of the stories in Two-Fisted Science, which I self-published way back when, with the help of a Xeric grant, as we were to bring it all the way back.
Yeah. Now, what was your What was your script writing model like? Did you have any idea of how comics are written?
Moore.
Oh, geez, you overwrote that
much?
Hell yes.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately.
I was wondering, because I think more from The Watchmen, as I recall, the first panel had 3 pages of script for Dave Gibbons.
As far as I know.
Yeah.
And the story, whether it's apocryphal, I don't know, but eventually Dave Gibbons hands it off to his wife and says, Here's the script. Here's a yellow highlighter. Find the stuff that I actually have to draw.
I believe it.
And that's what I want to look at. Nowhere near that level of detail.
But still, you're thinking in terms of...
I'm thinking in terms of page 1, panel 1, page 1, panel 2, all the way through to page last, panel last. And giving whatever amount of description that I can to both set the visual stage and to try to set the mood. What I'm going for, knowing full well, and because Steve,
at the time he was still growing as an artist, but became clearly he knows what he's doing.
He's already got the form. He's already got such a solid base.
Yeah, the chops. He had
So knowing full well that if I hand this off to someone like Steve Lieber or Colleen Duran, who also did a very short story in the book, they'll do what they want with it. I am not Alan Moore. I'm not Neil Gaiman. They will ignore things that are stupid, change things that don't quite work on the page for them, and that's fine. It's been that way ever since. It's something of a give and take always, and usually what comes back is a little bit of a surprise, at least once a page, and it's usually a good surprise. It's like, I wish I'd asked for that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I got it.
Right.
In the end.
The things you've learned from the artists.
Oh, yeah.
That apply to other scripts, other people.
Exactly. Yeah. Linda Medley, even though we've only worked briefly together on a couple short things, was brutal? That's not quite the right word. But extremely honest.
Yeah.
Honest to the extreme about some of the strengths and some of the shortcomings of my script. One of the things that she said that I thought was nice, and I didn't really realize it was true, is like, you seem to hold everything in middle distance. You're very polite with your characters.
Yeah.
So when you specify, Gil and Jim sitting talking, you're probably about 3 feet away. You should be, on more occasions than you are, saying, you're right in Gil's face. Mm-hmm. This is a super close-up because we want to see that particular corner of his eye twitch up. It's like, really, Jim? You're saying that? Mm-hmm. And you can't get that across from middle distance. Mm-hmm. So
do you see
I've learned a lot.
Has there been any... Have you thought of directing? Have you got, do you look at all in a visual style like that? Have you ever thought in terms of, either short video or anything like that?
Frankly, no. Yeah. I was talking with Hope Larson about this yesterday, though, because she's done some movie making. And I think she's interested in writing scripts, too, and dang, it seems natural to me. I think she would be fantastic, just looking the way she stages her own books. Yeah. It's probably a hard world to break into. One of the things she said is, like, you and I have sort of a brand in comics, but we don't, I have no brand.
Oh, no, you'd have to start trying to do, like, web episodes and things
like
that,
exactly.
do DIY.
Which strikes me as just nuts, because if I were a producer and Hope Larson showed up with a script, it would be producible.
Yeah.
Right away.
But what we think is producible is not, we need to sell this in China. That's
I guess.
The
so
deepest,
the things
China.
that I don't know about that sort of thing. So that's an interesting thought. I've actually started writing a play. Mm-hmm. And started, I think that means I've got like 2 pages of dialogue, and I've been thinking about it as a play. So there's really nothing there
Also
yet.
History of science, or?
No.
Yeah. Can you talk? Do you want to talk or no?
No.
Okay, that's good.
I shouldn't have even said that.
No, that's a sign that you're a good writer, because most accomplished writers I've interviewed, their most hated question is, so what are you working on? Mm-hmm. So just feel good about yourself that you do not want to discuss it. So that's a good thing. Yes, I am a real writer
Let
now.
it be noted to the podcast listeners that I'm now sitting up straighter and my shoulders have squared a little bit.
I give people confidence like
Thank
that.
you.
I make you feel like you've reached something.
Yeah, I have no idea if there's anything there and if I can do this. I really don't know the form. I've read plays like everybody did in high school, and I still do for enjoyment. Oh,
Michael Frayn? Oh, sorry, go on.
Exactly. I was going to say, and this Bohr Heisenberg scene,
that's
of
why
course,
I already wrote Michael Frayn's name down.
Turns into a play. Maybe it comes out the same year, maybe a year after our comic. I can't remember. Others have seen the dramatic potential in this as well, and the Frayn play is fantastic.
Copenhagen, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the combination of historical figures, that's something Tom Stoppard did with travesties, figuring out all these guys who were in, was it Trieste? In World War I, you have Joyce, Zara, and a few other people all in the same place. My unfortunate senior thesis was a novelization, or a novella about Orwell and Henry Miller, the day they met in Paris when Orwell was on his way to the fight in the Spanish Civil War.
Why the unfortunate?
Because I was a terrible writer. I was 22 years old, for God's sake. Yeah, I'm a terrible writer now, but I was 22 then, so I had an excuse. But yeah, the idea that, when people who did something meet and we don't know what really went on, that creates so much dramatic potential, I think.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Cool. And in this case, it was potentially world-shaking in terms of,
Also true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Engineering.
Yes.
How does it play into your storytelling? How did your background... You talk about curiosity, engineering, science, and comics. What's the matrix, and how do they feed off of each other?
That's an excellent question. I've never thought of engineering specifically. I tend to think in broader terms of science and technology type of thinking and training.
But you mentioned engineering as the course of study, and I wonder
that's
what
right.
that background...
And it is different. And so I was doing...
My day job puts me around pharmaceutical people all the time. Not the salespeople, but like the guys who actually operate facilities. So I'm used to the idea that engineering is a very different concept than, molecules.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Right. And you have to be careful about the shorthand, too, because oftentimes people say, oh, so you were a scientist. It's like,
we make science occur.
Are you a scientist? In which case, I'm an engineer. If you're not a scientist, close enough. And maybe that's the thing about engineering. Engineering has a, close enough sort of attitude, which science can't afford when you're at the basic lab level and working on discovering the fundamental truths of the universe. Engineers will say, plus minus 2%. I mean, this is
tolerance.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, a scientist goes to a restaurant and wants to give the correct tip down to the penny. The engineer will say, it's $20. $4, right? 20%, close enough. And if it was $21.20 and you're feeling generous, $5. Scientists won't do that.
Yeah.
I'm making horrible overgeneralizations.
That's
but,
okay.
But
You're the guy writing about them. So.
I guess. So I wonder, getting back to your actual question, if there's this taking pieces and it's the puzzle aspect and also the construction aspect. It's got to be something that works, and give yourself the leeway as an engineer, and I think you have to as a storyteller or writer, to not use the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You hear scientists, in all whatever we talk about in terms of controversial topics in science. I'm reading a book called The Merchants of Doubt right now, about a bunch of really bad people, is the way I'm coming to think of it, who have moved from issue to issue, actually, sowing doubt, because scientists are never 100% sure of anything. So the book starts with the tobacco industry, and, well, can you be absolutely sure that all these lung cancers are caused by smoking? And the answer is absolutely sure. Science doesn't work that way. So of course you will be able to find a scientist who says, yeah, I can't tell you that this tragic thing that happened to your spouse was caused by his or her cigarette smoking for lots of years. But stepping one step back, you can be pretty damn sure. Yeah,
but we act as though there's a court of law standard where, in fact, science doesn't need that level of,
Right. And so maybe that's the difference between, that's where the engineering background helps and says, I will not use 100% of this story because 100% of the story won't fit in. The Turing book would be 8,000 pages long. It would,
or with the Gödel thing you got in there, it would just be infinite. You couldn't exclude enough.
Right.
So that's my one mathematic theory.
There you go.
Perfect.
Perfect. And it would be funny, and that would actually have been a great thing to do on the web version of this book. Just like, and here, just scroll just keep forever.
As we discuss the theorem.
As we discuss Gödel's theorem. What a missed opportunity. I needed to talk to you like 7 years ago.
If only.
If only. But being willing to pick and choose and throw stuff out that doesn't work, that doesn't work for the story, I should say. That may be something that comes from that engineering background. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes when talking to people, and I think I've actually got that on a slide for tomorrow's presentation on nonfiction storytelling here at TCAF, I think I've got an equation. Emotional truth plus factual truth must be greater than 100%. But it's not always, you don't have to be 100% factually true, because you'll never get there. You do have to compress characters. An artist just couldn't draw all of these things. If, Brian Lee O'Malley in Scott Pilgrim has a couple scenes in the reference library, right?
Yeah.
He didn't draw every single individual who was standing there because, A, it would have driven him and his assistants, if he had any at the time, crazy. And B, it's not helpful. And if he was doing factual stuff, I assume he would do the same thing as me. It's like, this one great line comes from Amy. But that's the only interaction she had with Gil in this day, and otherwise it was all Chester Brown. So apologies to Amy, but I'm gonna
put it in someone else's.
I'm gonna give Chester your line today, because otherwise I have to introduce a new character, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So that sort of thing, and I feel no guilt doing making those sorts of compromises. And maybe again, that's the engineering background.
Yeah, do you ever get criticized by science historians or anything, or is it pretty much we're just happy you're doing this and getting enough of it out there?
Much more heavily weighted towards we're just happy you're doing this. Cool. Yeah, and people point stuff out that's wrong, and I maintain a web page for every single book that I've done, and there is a mistakes section.
Yeah.
on every one of them, and I think almost every one of them has some that somebody's pointed out. Sometimes it's just like complete
nitpicky sort of stuff.
Yeah, sometimes it's nitpicky, in which case I will say, thank you, you're right. Either A, I missed that, or B, I did that on purpose, and we're not going to fix it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, oh man, I cannot believe that. And I can't believe that, at this point I've been doing, I haven't been self-publishing for a few years. I've had the good fortune to work with bigger publishers who employ professional editors. And I cannot believe that the 3 editors who read this, and the copy editor, and me, and Leland, all missed that one. But it happens. Mm-hmm. In which case, most of the time, I've been really happy that the publishers will say, oh yeah, that's kind of an embarrassing goof. We will make the effort and pay the expense to fix that in the next edition.
See, again, you should feel like a professional writer at that point. That's really, again, a sign that you're reaching a high stature.
Oh, that's nice.
The publishers are actually saying, oh yeah, I guess we're responsible for this. So, nice.
Yeah.
The new book you mentioned is on Alan Turing.
Yes.
Has the same title as the movie that came out, or the
Coincidence.
biopic.
As far as I
Turing,
know.
20th century's most tragic scientific figure, or second most behind Nikolai Vavilov? Do you know Vavilov?
No, I don't.
Oh, right.
So,
it's the only the guy who came up with, he discovered Vavilov zones. He discovered the primal seeds of certain crops. And
I think you were telling me about this.
Possibly in 1998 when we met a long time ago. They put together in Russia, they have a seed bank that was founded to save
Definitely,
these things.
you've told me about this.
And yeah, the scientists. Oh, actually, that's probably why I told you. The scientists actually had to shoot at civilians who were trying to get into the seed bank during the famines.
During the famines, yeah.
And he ended up getting starved to death by Stalin and a scientific advisor who had a completely wrong conception of where this stuff came from and hated Vavilov. So yeah, the guy who tried to figure out how to save the world from starvation ended up getting starved to death. So I'm torn between him and Turing as most tragic figures. But
yeah, it's hard to beat food.
yeah. Still, what brought you to Turing, and what did you learn in the process of writing a book about him?
Yeah. So what brought me to Turing is what brought many, many, many people to him, and it's the Andrew Hodges book, Alan Turing, The Enigma. And I think that came out in the mid to late 80s, just during that period where I was also misspending my youth reading comic books, and a lot of them. But somehow this crossed my radar, and I read it, and I don't think it was very long after it came out. Because the printing I have is pretty early, and I remember getting it while I was a student at the University of Illinois, and I graduated in 86. No, that's probably not right. So I'll bet you my memory's wrong. I'll bet you I got it within the next couple of years, though. Anyway, fantastic book, super detailed.
The Bletchley stuff had been declassified at that point?
The Bletchley stuff starts to get declassified in the mid-'70s, I think. So you can talk about what Turing did. This is one of the amazing things about the Bletchley story, and not something. It just shocks people, especially today. The joke I use is it's unimaginable for anybody to keep a secret that important that long in a world of Tumblr, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah, we should tell the lesson for actually tell everyone what Bletchley Park was, the role it played, and why it was.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Bletchley Park. So actually, and the thing about Turing though is Bletchley Park is his second act in terms of doing things that would make him famous for the rest of history. But let's go right there. He led a group of code breakers who basically cracked the German naval code. It was being encoded on this Enigma machine, which was a commercially available product for years prior to this, and built his work off of a bunch of Polish mathematicians and code breakers who had done some fundamental stuff. But in the long and the short of it is, by the time the U.S. enters the war, the British are pretty close to real time reading the Nazis' encoded traffic, directing their submarines, warships, and et cetera. And for especially Europe and especially Britain, knowing what's happening on the seas, had to have saved thousands, if not millions, of lives. And Turing and his group created the method and then built machinery, special purpose computers, to crack this Enigma code. So that's...
Yeah. At the same time, everything had to be kept secret, and all of them basically had to say they were just secretarial.
That's right.
During the war, and for decades after. They couldn't reveal the extent of what they did to save.
Yes, and you read some of the oral histories and some of the memoirs of some of these men and women who did this, and they were still uncomfortable talking about it 25 years later. We promised Winston Churchill himself that we would not talk. And there's a great story that didn't fit into the book about some of these folks, 10 years later, 10 years after the war, and where relations are much better with Germany, and code breakers get to meet, or maybe it was a mathematics conference or something, and they're, having beers or whatever they were doing, and the Germans said, well, that was a horrible time, but we're still proud of our work, and at least you didn't break the Enigma code. And the British cryptographers just sort of, smile and sip their beer, and 20
you sure got us there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We were stuck.
Yeah, I remember I used to do a lot of reading on this because I had an idea for a novel that I never pursued, which is the story of my life, which I'll never write. But thank you. About the things, even when you had broken the code and were able to figure out something horrible that was going to happen, you couldn't necessarily try to prevent it because you might reveal that
That's
you
right.
had broken
You can't
the code.
act on all the intelligence you have.
Yeah, for fear of giving away that you've broken it and they will start changing
Yeah,
things.
so the spy versus spy, to get a brief comics reference in there. Kids, that used to be a comic in Mad Magazine.
I interviewed Peter Cooper last December.
Doing
Yeah,
it?
he's doing I think he's still doing it, yeah.
I don't read Mad anymore, but
because we're not 12, but yeah, still.
Right. But you go by Peter Cooper's table if he's here at TCAF, and it's like, oh my gosh, look at these beautiful, beautiful things he makes.
Yeah, he was. And I don't know if you've seen his new book, Ruins.
No, I haven't.
Oh, pick that up. It came out at SPX last year.
Okay.
Because our lives tend to be punctuated by comics festivals.
Well, and you live right there, right?
No, I'm up in New Jersey, so everything is sort of a haul for me. Mocha was convenient.
Close.
Actually, Peter was there too. But we're talking comic stuff. We should be talking Turing.
It's okay.
But yeah, Peter's new book is really fantastic.
Thank you.
Actually, it does raise a question. Let's say living artist you want to write for at some point.
The list is too long.
Okay.
I think, and I'd feel embarrassed the second we shut off the.
Oh, I should have.
Yeah.
It's like, Jaime Hernandez. Yeah.
I'd actually. Well, yeah.
Yeah, duh.
I wouldn't have even come up with his name, but yes.
But deceased artist, was there somebody you wish you had gotten before they passed?
A couple. I was actually talking with Gil Kane for a while.
Oh, that would have been something.
Mm-hmm. And I think we only ended up, it was correspondence, and this is I don't think email, and certainly, someone Gil Kane's age wouldn't have had email at the time that we were
I think
doing
he
this.
died by the late 90s or like 2000 or so.
Is it that late?
At the most. I remember reading the obit in my office in a building I remember the building I was in when I read it, and I think I was only there from 97 to 2000, so somewhere around there.
Okay. But, so I'm actually misremembering here again the time frame. But also, it's probably still true that, if you're 80 years old in 1999, you're not having email.
Yeah.
So anyway,
but
some correspondence and then one really long phone conversation about it. And, he was a delight to talk to. And it would have been, I've got a story that I wrote, Gil Kane drew.
This guy actually read my words and drew it.
Exactly. Right.
And then drew a picture going up at somebody's nostril.
Of
that
course.
Was the standard
And I would
Gil
have,
Kane.
I hope I would have given him something that would have.
So the camera should be a little low going up, and
Don't you
that's.
think? Your call, man. But that's the way I see it.
Scientific.
That
Sorry.
would be great. It's like, so, Mr. Kane, I see sort of a Gil Kane shot here. But, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about. Favorite scientific figure, though, that you haven't written about? Is there someone you're on the horizon with? I figure you're not giving anything away that somebody else would grab because you've kind of cornered this.
No, I don't think I've cornered it at all.
Yeah. Don't give away anyone you're secretly hoping
there's
to
a French publication about Turing that I've seen but haven't read because I don't read French, and it's a very different take on the story, or at least so it appeared to me. I think there's room for a lot. So, for instance, I did a couple short pieces about Marie Curie in a very early book. And now I don't think I can do it anymore because a woman named Lauren Redness did a book called Radioactive. And it's not comics, but it's still an intermingling of prose and text that...
prose and pictures.
I'm sorry, thank you. Prose and pictures.
It's early. Yeah.
That feels like comics, and it's so unusual and so good. It's like, all right,
you nailed that one. I'm just going to be,
it's done. There doesn't need to be a book. And almost getting back to the Turing. So why do Turing when there is the Hodges book? In the story I like to tell, apologies, Dave, my closest friend is all but dissertation, PhD dissertation in physics, and now a lawyer, and he's, I think, 2-2-1 at the Supreme Court, something like that. So, smartest person I know, and got bogged down in the Hodges biography because it's so detailed.
It's an awfully long book.
And it's an awfully long book. And there's just so much attention that many people, I should say, can pay to a given story. And I think, and something that Dave pointed out to me that I hadn't really realized, because since reading the book, the first time, and probably went back to it and reread some of it many years ago, and then for the purposes of this book, used it almost as an encyclopedia and a timeline, basically. And by the way, the index in the Hodges book, the under the Alan Turing entry, he actually writes it as one run-on sentence. It's readable, point by point, with page numbers. It's very clever.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Italo Calvino or Nabokov pulling one of those little tricks.
It's something that you don't even notice until you're paying closer attention to the index, the narrative. And it's like, oh man, nice work. So anyway, Hodges also tried to give some of the mathematics without showing any math. Mm-hmm. And I think that drove Dave a little crazy because it's like, I can do the math. So given all those things, you can, there are new takes and new readerships that you can attract to a story by doing something in a different medium and maybe a little shorter.
Mm-hmm. What's the actually, I'm going to ask you a question one of my listeners sent when I said I'm going to be interviewing the wonderful author of The Imitation Game.
Thank you, listener.
Yeah, he says, you delve into Alan Turing's life, but also spend some time describing the Entscheidungsproblem, a complicated concept in computer science and mathematics. How difficult is it to make these types of complex theories accessible using the comic book form? Are you influenced by other science writers such as George Gamow? Who was able to successfully describe difficult concepts in physics to a general audience?
Yes, I've read Gamow.
Yeah,
I've read lots and lots of Asimov on Asimov on physics, Asimov on chemistry. Asimov wrote like 4,000 books or some ridiculous number. So I do read a lot of popular science or science popularization.
Yeah,
I love that stuff.
And use your engineering background to break that down to figure out what they're actually doing?
I hope. Yeah. Not consciously, I don't think. But I hope that some of it has soaked in. Specifically for the stopping problem. That was difficult. I had to feel like I understood it a little bit myself first to be able to try to explain it. And math in general, people for years have been asking, when are you going to do a mathematician? It's like, there are some great ones to do, but so much of math lives purely in the realm of the abstract and in the symbols that making it visual is difficult. Turing gives you the handle for this with the stopping problem. For those who don't know, it's I'm not going to describe the problem specifically, but it was a classic problem in pure mathematics that was posed by a man named David Hilbert, and it was one of these unsolved problems, like Fermat's theorem. People know that one, which has since been solved, but only very recently, relatively speaking.
And using tools that Fermat would not have had available.
Exactly right.
So,
yeah. Impossible. And the gag with Fermat is he thought he had a solution. And he said, it's just a little too long to write in the margin of the book here. And most historians and other mathematicians said, no, he was probably wrong too. He had posed the problem, which was an interesting one, thought he had solved it, but probably he hadn't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But the stopping problem.
The stopping problem is out there for many years. And it turns out that another person, Alonzo Church, solved it almost simultaneously to Turing. And does so with the very traditional tools of mathematics, stuff that you know, love, or probably more likely hate, those techniques from geometry class. Formal proof. Turing pulls an Isaac Newton, basically, to solve this. And when I say pulls an Isaac Newton...
He creates his own...
Exactly. So somebody comes up to Newton and says, hey, I don't get why the planets go around the sun in ellipses rather than circles.
And Newton create a whole new field of math to show you why that is.
I'm not sure why either. Hang on. Let me get back to you. It's like 3 months later or whatever. It's like, okay, so I invented calculus, and now I can show you. So Turing basically invents the modern computer in the abstract, programs it in his head, and then comes up with this metaphor of an infinitely long paper tape to run the program. And that's the visual hook that you can put on Turing's work. Have him walking along an infinitely long paper tape, and he leaves his friends behind back at infinity as he goes to further infinity to show this. And you just couldn't do it with the Church solution, because Church is axiom X leads us therefore to this thing Y, and it's all math and formal logic symbols, and nobody wants to look at that for page after page after page.
Or the people who do tend not to like comics.
So mathematics in particular is very, very, I think, very difficult. Somebody asked me that just, I guess it was Thursday at Book Expo America. It's like, are you going to do more mathematicians? Like, I'm going to have to find another one who was visual the way Turing is visual, because I don't think I have the chops to come up with a way to make the proof of Fermat's theorem visual. I've seen computer graphic simulations of, what they did with
the curve theory and everything else.
It's kind of pretty, because most representations of math are kind of pretty, but it's hard to
how much of that is a challenge, do you think, for the public in general, given that we're headed into an era of scientific know-nothingness where people are proud of being ignorant?
You mean an election year?
Yeah, or America as we know it. Let me tell you, coming into Toronto yesterday, and we're at the customs counter at Porter's Airport, and they had a news TV, screen going, and we were standing there for a full minute, and I realized I haven't had anything about Trump. Oh my God. It was just,
how nice.
We're in another country. This is great. But how much, I don't want to say that science is responsible for it, but given the progressive abstraction of a lot of math and a lot of other science, where things have become so specialized and so far beyond the ken of the general public, how much are we to blame, and how much is science is sort of down the rabbit hole progression?
I doubt that it's a one or the other. I think it's probably both. There's a reason that most of the things that I've done are further back in history, because these are the times. These are the fundamental discoveries, so they're important still. And I tend to think of Turing as important in so many ways, and as this thoroughly modern person who just happened to live, in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. You could go do something in a room, in a lab, that you could then bring your scientifically illiterate cousin in and show them. It's like, and that's an electron zooming through.
You walk them through the
you
process.
can walk them through what you did, and someone with some basic education would get it. I think you're right that at this point, trying to you have this challenge, even though you work with specialists all the time, I would imagine.
Trying to convey to non-combatants what,
right.
Even, again, the pharmaceutical side I'm in,
mm-hmm.
People just, well, the drug should be cheaper and work better and
right.
more accessible. I'm like, yeah, you can't get all those things, and you don't understand what goes into actually making these and making sure the government's happy with what you're doing in compliance.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole regulatory world, seems weird and ridiculous oftentimes, but full well that yes, some of it is weird and ridiculous.
And if you didn't have it?
But it would be way worse if zero would be worse than what we have right now.
Yeah.
Zero regulation would be worse. Mm-hmm. But how do you explain that to somebody
without talking down?
Right.
Which is what we...
Or without the luxury that you and I have of like sitting here talking for about an hour. Mm-hmm. My mom doesn't want to hear an hour's worth of...
I always tell people who ask how are you going to monetize the podcast? I'm like, you understand what this is, right? This is long-form conversation that people are having where they actually learn and go into some concepts that maybe they neither one had thought about before. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to pay for that audience, so it's all right.
Well, yeah, sorry to get on that tangent. There was and I haven't listened to it yet, but no, maybe I did. There was on the media, the NPR program. Yeah. Did something about NPR's problem of the aging audience and the desire, and the podcast audience as well, because actually the podcast audience is the audience that wants to listen to this, but they can no longer really put that on the air, even for your typical NPR listener. Yeah. Those stories are too long. And so how do you balance what NPR's mission, and they've done a great job of giving you more than just 12 seconds. Yeah. Of this without going to the full 48 minutes, and how do you keep the people who are paying? Because like most podcast listeners, I don't pay directly to most of the podcasts. Right. I am an NPR supporter, and every 6 months.
And this show does have a Patreon if you wanted to contribute. No, I'm just kidding. It's okay. You're contributing by sitting down with me, so that's I consider this much more valuable than anything else.
What's my hourly rate? So how long am I exempt from adding to the Patreon here?
But yeah, that sense of a dividing public. I guess it's sort of like that that C.P. Snow.
Two cultures?
Yeah, which I think had been debunked relatively well in recent years. But still, that idea that you've got a specialist class and it's increasingly specialized. Yeah. You can still work to handle the concepts that are popularizable, as well as the scientists and their lives.
And the hope is all my books have notes and references and bibliographies. Mm-hmm. If you found Turing, if this was not enough, I am not offended. Yeah. There are other good books to read. And you can learn more, and maybe every once in a while someone will come up and say, "No, this is for my 13-year-old daughter, and she really likes math."
Yeah, what's your audience? What have you found your audience in general?
So broad, which is really heartening and really, nice.
Because I'd wondered if, when I started this book, I'm like, well, you've got Turing, the homosexuality thing. I have no idea if this is... if it's meant for a YA audience, and that means you have to approach it in a certain way because somebody's parents might freak the hell out about reading it.
Quite possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a lot of those conversations the past couple of days when I was talking to a whole bunch of librarians. Like, middle school? It's like, I wouldn't go middle school. Yeah. Always depends on the kid. But if it was middle school, for the Turing book specifically we're talking about, if I were you, school librarian, public librarian, the parents, I'd just let the parents know that there's a tragic death in here depicted as likely suicide, and there are gay people in here because Turing was gay, and we're not gonna...
Yeah, there's nothing graphic, but it does inform a chunk of his life, and...
Right. Yeah. Didn't make it like the centerpiece because, frankly, Turing didn't consider it the centerpiece of his life. He was... so thoroughly matter-of-fact about it. Yeah. And it's like, And there were no gay pride marches in the 50s anyway. But he wouldn't have been a guy who would have gone on them regardless, I don't think. It's like, I'm a scientist. I happen to be gay.
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed of the way I am. But that's not the main.
Yeah, and I thought you conveyed that. Well, you conveyed the rest of the culture's approach to that, at least in the Bletchley world, where it was we all knew, but it wasn't a thing, and we all were there to do something else. It's not like you even have somebody reacting rather badly at one point, and then
the Don Bailey. I was going to say the Don Bailey character, but he's a real
actually
person.
Don Bailey. Yeah, but over time, within a few panels, it's basically we'll just put that under the rug and we'll work.
Who cares?
Right. So it was kind of interesting seeing that and how it plays out and ends up, being the seeds of his undoing.
That's the conversation I tend to have with librarians and parents. It's like, have a look through and see if you think your son or daughter is ready to do this, and if you're ready to have the conversation if it comes up. It's like, did he kill himself? Did he poison himself? Because any reader will have that question, or what does they say he was gay? But I don't know what that means. Yeah. Are you might need to have that conversation. High school on up.
Yeah, it's reality.
No big deal.
The challenge of writing. Oh, sorry.
To get the broader answer is, I get email from 7-year-olds and emeritus faculty member of physics.
Nice.
So
that's pretty good. Pretty good range.
Yeah, a full order of magnitude difference in age.
The challenge of writing about people smarter than yourself.
It's really easy because there's so many.
Yeah.
It offers a world of opportunity.
But that ability to capture, like the eureka moment for some of them, capturing the what the discovery means at the time and what it means to be able to see things in ways that regular people just are not able to see. Not that they're some mutant power, but just that they have a perspective and a level of genius that normal people don't have. How tough is that to convey?
I almost want to throw it back at you as like, do I convey it? If I convey it, then it must not be so hard. Yeah. Because it's clearly doable. I'm tempted to use the Feynman quote. What one person can do, another person can do. At the same time, I work pretty hard to understand it well enough myself so that I can convey at least, like you said, that eureka moment, or what I consider it the interrobang moment, the question mark exclamation point jammed together. It's like, what? What did I just see there in nature? Or what just happened on the lab bench? Or, Turing doodling around. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, this could.
I could. Yeah. In getting that idea across, that I've tended to write about what I'm going back to Feynman again, and the description that lots of his colleagues used about Feynman. I tend to be writing about extraordinary geniuses rather than ordinary geniuses.
Yeah.
Do you know this
No.
brief anecdote? So one of Feynman's friends said, there are geniuses who you look at him and you say, all right, Gil, I see how Gil got to where he is. He works harder than me. He's a little bit smarter than me. He had some opportunities that I didn't have. And he happened to be at Yosemite rock climbing, and he saw this crazy thing, and that triggered this amazing idea. And that's genius, but I could see myself becoming that person.
It's on the continuum.
It's on the continuum. Yeah. And then they were talking about Feynman, and then it's like, and then there's the wizards. You just don't know how they got there. And then once they're there, you can see a path to them. But you can't imagine finding the path yourself, no matter how hard you worked, no matter how lucky you were. There's just no level of being just a little smarter that would get you there. So by writing about mostly those type of folks, I get a pass on... I hope, I get a pass on taking the reader all the way through to the insight, but do get the joy of showing, let's say, wait, what?
Yeah, we'll say the magic, even though we mean...
Yeah. And because I'm not an artist, I get some of that every time with a book anyway, myself. Because I do a lot of hard work, I think. This is sounding self-serving, but sorry.
Yeah. You've produced a body of work. As much as we're self-deprecating about it, you've put in the hours.
Yeah. So, okay. I have put in the hours. And then I hand it off to an artist. And I get those, wait, what? Moments myself. When the art starts to come in, I'm like, that's not how I pictured it. That's not the story I saw in my head. But as we were saying earlier, it's like, the majority of the time it's like, that's better.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm happy. This is gonna make a better experience for everybody, for the reader. And just to say something that I emphasize all the time when, again, giving workshops or talks about the process. When the art comes back, my rule for myself is I don't get to look at my script right away. Mm-hmm. I see what's on the page. And if that works, it's done. Doesn't matter what I asked for. If it doesn't work, then I will go back and read in an embarrassing number of times. I don't think it's like half, but more than zero. It's like, oh, she gave me exactly what I asked for, and what I asked for was dumb.
Was wrong. Okay.
Janine, Colleen, Maris, whoever. Sorry, I told you to do this, and it's not right. Can we redraw that? And then work it out.
You could always pull I did some more research, and it turns out that we need to.
I wish it was that simple, or that was what usually happened. Nah, it's usually me screwing up on the storytelling side.
So we talked curiosity, engineering, science, and comics. Mm-hmm. Does a curiosity predate everything? Does a curiosity lead to a pursuit of engineering? So. And I'm wondering, is curiosity ultimately the core of you, and from how you ended up in the various fields you did leading up to this? Yeah,
I don't think there's a complicated or long answer to this, which I'm sure you're relieved to hear. Yeah,
because most people just aren't curious, and that's one of those.
Right?
Oh yeah, my anecdote many years ago. When I was working as an editor, I had to fix something on the website for our magazine, and two assistant editors were aghast and stunned that I knew how to just basic HTML stuff. Mm-hmm. They had both graduated college recently, and this is early 2000s, and they had come up with the internet around them their entire high school and beyond. Mm-hmm. And I said, but didn't you ever hit view source? Didn't you ever want to see what the code was that made a web page?
Had they never made their own page? Okay.
It had never occurred to them to look behind the curtain. And to me, the first thing I did when we heard about HTML and the internet was, I could make this and it would look like this on somebody else's screen. And you realize in those moments that curiosity is a rare thing, as it turns out.
Yes, and so much of that type of work has been commoditized, we were talking briefly about NPR. It's like every single podcast that I listen to is sponsored by Square. You want a professional looking website in 34 seconds?
You don't need to know anything about code.
Yeah. And to some extent,
that's a success. That is that you don't need to know the nuts and bolts of it, but just in general, knowing how things work is.
I wouldn't want to code a web page for my mom by hand now, or my sister, or my dad, or whoever. It's like, pay the $50,
get a template,
$10 a month, and just do. And frankly, if I tried to do it, my skills there are so stale.
You'd have little marching ant boxes. Would that be
right? Yeah, and blink. I'd use the blink tag, of course.
It'd be funny if someday they revise HTML to the point at which that's not supported anymore, and they simply can't. You can't represent this stuff.
I wonder.
Yeah. Do you keep up with hard science?
Yeah, but not. I don't aggressively try to keep up.
Yeah.
I have this is probably showing my age. I have a number of RSS feeds from hard science sites.
Were you crushed when Google Reader went down?
Yeah, I was bummed. But Feedly is very good.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Is that what you switched to too? Yeah.
Because we're a couple of...
Yeah. Because we're that kind of person.
We're dinosaurs, but, digital dinosaurs.
So those things come in. I listen to a couple podcasts regularly. I listen to the AAAS Science podcast, which gets me sort of headline news. and one in-depth story. And I listen to you can't tell this, listener, but we are here in Canada, which is a country with its own laws and government and society and everything.
It's America's hat. Go on.
And there's a terrific science program called Quirks and Quarks, and it's been on for I don't know how long, many, many years. I started listening to it 10, 15 years ago. I'm in the... I wouldn't have discovered this other than I live very close to Canada. I live in Southeast Michigan, and so we can get CBC
Yeah.
radio like direct into our transistor radios that we plug into our ear pieces, and somehow ran across this program. It's currently hosted by a guy named Bob McDonald. He's a great interviewer, and it's an hour-long show. So I keep up that way. And, headline news. I am, unfortunately, one of the many people who have contributed to the decline of the newspaper industry. I no longer subscribe to a daily newspaper. But
it's about the carbon footprint. Tell yourself that. That's
okay.
Yeah, I don't want them driving by and dropping off a newspaper and
so resource intensive.
Yeah.
But I'm not a junkie for it, and I'm not seeking it out hourly. Like, what happened? I mean, I knew when gravitational waves were detected, probably a few hours earlier than
it reached the general populace.
But it wasn't like I wasn't sitting on the edge of my seat for whatever it was, the 5 months, knowing that they were probably going to do it. I wasn't paying that close attention.
But you watch the SpaceX attempts at landing?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. I have a few friends who basically will just retweet like every picture on Twitter as they're
it's amazing.
Watching it come in.
There was a really good article last week. I can't remember where it was from. It might have just been one of the space science blogs saying, if failure is not an it was basically playing off the Gene Kranz quote, failure is not an option. Mm-hmm. But you have to let failure be an option, otherwise you won't get to land a rocket on a boat.
Yeah. And even getting a drone boat out to the right spot was, it's as a smaller achievement, that's pretty goddamn impressive. And then having a rocket land on top of it.
Yeah, pretty great.
Yeah, it's an awesome time to live in. I have a bunch more questions, but I should let you get down to TCAF.
Well, you want to do too.
Yeah, and I figure... we'll probably record again, at which point I can ask you about your career as a PGA caddy.
It was only a week long.
A short career as a PGA caddy, as well as what you're doing as a librarian.
But I did use the Porta-John right after Jack Nicklaus.
Nice. Did he? Never mind. I'm not going to ask.
No, but you're standing there, right? And waiting
and this
in
guy
line.
Comes out
and kids these days, think Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
It's like you're standing there waiting to use the bathroom, and it's like one of these crappy outdoor things, and out walks
the greatest golfer.
Of the time. It's like, oh,
that's gotta be.
Which is actually thoroughly awkward because you're not supposed to make eye contact with people as they walk in and out of the bathroom. But anyway, this should probably be cut from the podcast.
No, it adds color, as it were. I accosted a literary author when we were at the Antiquarian Book Fair a few weeks ago. I was coming out of the bathroom, leaving. He was coming in. And I'd wanted to pitch him on the show. And so I just said his name, and he turned around. I'm like, I'm sorry to interrupt you at obviously a critical time, but, went into the podcast, who he is, who I am, et cetera. He seemed okay with it. We didn't shake hands for obvious reasons, but
fine.
Still,
but you exchange emails eventually, and it's probably going to happen?
We got them lined up.
Cool.
So, actually, there's one question left to ask you, and it's not bathroom related. Writing long form versus starting out in a shorter story mode. How different was that for you? What did you have to? What did you learn, or how did stories accommodate the longer setting?
Yeah, that's
something
I haven't thought about for a while. But when I look back on the books as they progressed, the first book was very anecdotal, loosely related, but more by theme than anything else. It's science.
Yeah. And it was composed of shorts, though.
But it was all shorts. But with the next book, Dignifying Science, the stories about women scientists, a story arc for all these various people who worked in quite disparate disciplines, presented itself. And so you could order the stories in a way that you go from, I think the way I've come to say is least self-actualized to most self-actualized, as in, and maybe this is the wrong word, so maybe there's a better way to say it, but least in control of her destiny as a scientist to most in control of her own destiny.
Yeah.
And her career. And so the next book I did was one continuous story about the Manhattan Project, but I was still tentative, and it's still early days, and it was hard to get any artist to commit to 200 pages.
Sure.
So I broke it up into discrete chunks that could, I hope, reasonably be drawn in different styles and serve the narrative in doing so. And then the next one was one continuous story. So it's almost like this gradual
you had to grow
evolution.
Up. As a writer, you grew into a longer...
Yeah, and the stories seemed to, and this was not a plan, I promise, but in retrospect, it can almost look like one.
It looks like developing confidence in what you're doing, and developing confidence that the stories can sustain themselves, and that an audience is there to actually read them. That they don't just want to read a 6-pager. They're concerned with 200.
and you do get feedback. Even in the early days before the internet was a thing, and there was an internet. In fact, there was a web already in '97.
But that was for geeks and nerds.
But
As
it was
my former
really
publisher said back in 1996, we don't need a web page for the magazine. That's for a bunch of geeks and nerds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Kids,
it was very different feel. But you do get feedback at shows and letters, and people were emailing, and it's like, so I want the encouraging ones, and it was mostly encouraging, which was nice. We're saying, are you going to do something longer? Are you going to? And so part of that encouragement gave me maybe the confidence to try a full-on one subject, one artist book. And actually the first full one artist, one subject book was also illustrated by Leland Purvis, who illustrated The Imitation Game. So I'm really grateful that he had the faith and the stick-to-itiveness to do that with me the first time, and then actually come back again for a second round of punishment or something.
And you ended up on the New York Times bestseller list both times. So
No.
Oh,
Suspended Language did not.
Oh, I was just thinking of the Feynman book. My bad.
That's Leland Myrick.
Oh,
I've cornered the market on Leland.
Good job.
As comic book artists. Yeah, it's crazy. No, really it is, because I don't know of any other Lelands.
No, I
who are
assumed it
professional
was
comics artists.
Wow.
And I've worked with both of them. Leland Purvis twice. Leland Myrick once published, but he's in the process of drawing another book with me right now.
So I think that's scientific evidence right there. You working with someone named Leland produces good results.
I hope I can do it with others as well. But...
or have people change their name.
Right.
Jim Ottaviani, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual
Oh,
Memory
you're welcome,
Show.
Gil. This was really great. Thank you.
And that was Jim Ottaviani. His website is www.gtlabs.com, and that's GT-Labs. He blogs there semi-frequently. He's also available on Twitter at GTLabsRat. Jim's new book is The Imitation Game, Alan Turing Decoded. It's drawn by Leland Purvis. It's published by Abrams Comic Arts, and it's available in bookstores and comic shops everywhere. Now, after the main conversation, I asked Jim, so, who are you reading? If you want to get his answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories show so you can get access to our monthly podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including the bonus podcast, patron-only blog, a series of ebooks I'm hoping to launch, and a lot more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. And if you don't like Patreon, just go to paypal.me/VMSpod and make your donation that way, and you'll get access to the same stuff. You can also mail me a check. Just drop me an email, and I'll give you my address. So special thanks go out to Paul W. Jones, Michael Janazik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, and Zach Martin for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. I've got the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. This episode was recorded at the Marriott Bloor Yorkville in Toronto during the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. It was a fun weekend, but it did cost some money, part of which was expense to work because I went to go visit some clients in the area, but about 2/3 of it was all on me. So if you want to help defray some of my costs, visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David. You can find out more and support that at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that is it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with Glynis Fawkes, an amazing cartoonist and archaeologist who I recorded with also at TCAF. Until next time, you can subscribe to the show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.